UFC Fight Night Vegas 46, Kattar versus Chikadze takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card. I know it's not the best card to come back to after 4 weeks off, but it's still a UFC card, and that's enough for me. I'm going to start with the early prelim opener of Silvana Gomez-Juarez versus Vanessa Demopulous. I'm going to go with Vanessa Demopulous here. Most people on Tapology are actually picking Silvana Gomez-Juarez. I think the main reason they're actually doing that is because she's got a better record than Vanessa Demopulous, and they haven't actually watched either of them fight. In my opinion, Vanessa Demopulous is a much better fighter than Silvana Gomez-Juarez. Silvana Gomez-Juarez hasn't fought the best of competition, got easily dealt with in her debut in the UFC against Lupita Godinez, who armbarred her in the first round very, very easily. Other than that, she hasn't really fought too many great opponents, but Vanessa Demopulous has fought some really good opponents in her career, and has had decent performances against them. Now, she did get beaten by JJ Aldridge, but again, JJ Aldridge is a pretty underrated fighter in women's MMA. She's been around for a while, but she's still young, trains with the best like Rose Namajunas, sometimes Valentina Shevchenko, so I'm not going to be too hard on her for losing to JJ Aldridge in her debut. She stayed active doing grappling bouts at the end of the year, and she was also training for this fight in the first place against Ashley Yoder, and now we've got Silvana Gomez-Juarez stepping in, so I do like Vanessa Demopulous here. She went to a majority decision loss to Lupita Godinez, and I know it's not like you can't just say it like that and use that kind of MMA math, but to watch Lupita Godinez go to a very, very close majority decision win against Vanessa Demopulous and then easily dismantle Silvana Gomez-Juarez with an armbar in the first round, I'm going to take that into consideration here when there's not too much information. Plus, Corey McKenna, another UFC fighter who's quite good. Vanessa Demopulous went to a very close decision with her on the Contender Series as well. She beat Sam Hughes, who's in the UFC, and beat her by triangle choke in the 4th round. That's a credible win, I guess, because Sam Hughes was 4-0 at the time. I'm mainly looking at the Lupita Godinez fights. Just the competitiveness that Vanessa Demopulous showed in that fight compared to Silvana Gomez-Juarez is night and day. I have no idea why 67% of people on Tapology are picking Silvana Gomez-Juarez. I think they're literally just looking at records and haven't even taken any time to do any research. So I'm going to go with Vanessa Demopulous winning this one, getting the job done by decision over Silvana Gomez-Juarez. Moving on up the card, Brian Kelleher versus Saidyokub Kakhramonov. Amazing bout on the prelims. I really wish this was actually a bit higher up on the card, but it gives you a reason to watch the prelims, I guess. Amazing bout. Saidyokub is a very good prospect, came into the UFC and beat Trevin Jones in his debut, which is no easy task. It's Trevin Jones. He's a problem for many fighters, including Timo Valiev on his night. Of course, that fight got overturned to a no contest, but again, he caught Timo Valiev in that second round and finished him. He's beaten Mario Batista. Trevin Jones is a very capable fighter, and to watch Saidyokub go out there and handle him in a reasonably competitive fight in the earlier rounds, but eventually he started to get the better of him, working him very well in that second round, landing good body shots, landing good shots on the feet, and just staying very aware in the grappling situations. Trevin Jones kept trying to get him down to the ground. Saidyokub was not having it. He was keeping himself standing up on the feet. Jones was like holding him against a cage in certain moments, but Saidyokub was the only one doing any damage and eventually got a guillotine choke for himself in the 3rd round once things slowed down and Trevin Jones started to be a little bit more predictable with his shots, and eventually, of course, Saidyokub started to have more success on the feet as well. Brian Kelleher is always a really good underdog pick. He's beaten some good opponents. He handles subpar competition very well. Now, of course, he has beaten some opponents where, out of nowhere, he gets a win. Of course, against Hunter Azure, he was getting dealt with in the earlier rounds, but landed a big shot in the second, because Hunter Azure sort of just blew his cardio out of proportion massively, used up all his cardio in those early rounds, going for a finish against Brian Kelleher, and then Kelleher just got the job done in the second once Hunter Azure started to slow down. But he beat Ray Rodriguez, he beat Domingo Pilate by decision, exposed his grappling there by just staying on top the entire time, essentially, and he's coming off a win right now, so he's going to be very confident going into this one. He also beat Ode Osborne by guillotine in the 1st round as well. But, in my opinion, if you don't have massive holes in your game, you can kind of get by Brian Kelleher. I feel like Brian Kelleher is like a Sam Alvey-ish type guy, where unless you've got a glaring weakness in your game, you're probably going to get by them, and I just trust Saidyokub as a prospect coming up to get this one done. Sure, he's lost earlier on in his career, but he lost to Pete Vargas, who was 6-1 at the time. Of course, lost to Umar Nurmagomedov, and he took that fight on short notice at the PFL. Still went to a decision with Umar Nurmagomedov, which is more than you can say about good prospects in the UFC and capable bantamweight fighters like Sergey Morozov, who couldn't make it to a decision against Umar, even on full camp. I'm going to trust Saidyokub Kakhramonov. I trust his stand-up. I think it's one of his best aspects of his game. He's got good grappling and good grappling awareness to keep himself out of danger and stop himself from getting finished. He doesn't do stupid stuff like shoot a takedown out of nowhere badly and get guillotined, which is often what Kelleher catches people with. I'm going to go with Saidyokub Kakhramonov by... How am I going to pick him to win this one? I think I'll go with Saidyokub Kakhramonov by decision win over Brian Kelleher. I think Kelleher's going to give him some problems, but Saidyokub's going to have a smart game plan, keeping it standing, stuffing the takedowns of Kelleher, which is going to make Kelleher slow as the fight goes on. And you know what I'm going to call, actually? I'm going to go for like a third round finish. I don't know if I'm going to go submission or TKO. I'll say submission because it seems like he pounces for them whenever he notices he has his fighter a little bit hurt or notices that a fighter's starting to slow down. So I'm going to go with a third round submission win for Saidyokub Kakhramonov, defending takedowns in the earlier parts of the rounds, making Kelleher start to slow down, and then Kelleher starts to shoot a little bit more desperately, maybe gets guillotined, maybe gets Darce choked. I'm going to trust Saidyokub Kakhramonov to get this one done. Moving on up the card, Dakota Bush versus Borshchev, and I'm going to try his first name right now because I can't quite see how to pronounce that. Viacheslav Borshchev. I'm going to go with Borshchev here. I liked his performance on the Contender Series against a very good prospect in Chris Duncan out of the UK. 7-0, undefeated guy. Finished him in the second round really easily. Now, of course, Chris Duncan made weight a couple of weeks before, then had to make weight again afterwards, which is going to affect your chin and your performance in general. But overall, Borshchev is a very capable fighter. He lost to William Starks, who is not even a bad fighter in the first place. A very good fighter himself. I believe he even fought on the Contender Series as well, if I'm not mistaken. I am mistaken. I'm horrifically mistaken. He fought on a Dana White's looking for a fight situation. Completely off there. But either way, he's a good fighter himself, William Starks. Now at LFA. Looking very good over there. Or he's had some fights at LFA and he's won. And now he's fighting at LFA next. I'm going to go with Borshchev here. But Dakota Bush is a very good grappler. And it does worry me a little bit that so many on Tapology are going with Borshchev. I agree he's very good. He looked good against Chris Duncan. Managed to get back up when he was on the ground. Stuffed a couple of takedowns as well. And he's got really good stand-up. And he trains at a good gym as well. But Dakota Bush is a very capable grappler. And Austin Hubbard is very good takedown defense. So you could see an upset here where Dakota Bush maybe just exposes a bad ground game in Borshchev. But, I'm going to trust Borshchev to win this one. I think he's going to eventually get this done late second round. I think that Dakota Bush maybe will out-grapple him in the first round. Stay on top, do some damage there. Borshchev's going to work his way back up, but Dakota Bush will stick to him, take him down again, maybe have a little bit of success on the feet. I just don't think Dakota Bush has the level of grappling to finish a Borshchev, to like really pin him to the mat and dominate him over the 3 rounds to a unanimous decision win. I reckon I can see Dakota Bush getting the better of Borshchev in the grappling, Borshchev working his way back up every time, and Dakota Bush starting to slow down because he's not getting the control time that he wants out of the takedowns, and eventually Borshchev like tags him with a couple of good body shots in round 2, and a couple of good hooks in round 2, so I'm going to go with a round 2 finish, late in the second round for Borshchev. I think he wears down Dakota Bush by defending some of the takedowns, working his way back up, and eventually puts him away at the end of the second with TKO strikes, body shots, hooks upstairs, finishes him against the cage. But Dakota Bush is actually a good underdog, and I'm surprised more people aren't picking him. Very good underdog here, but I'm going to trust in Borshchev. Moving on up the card, TJ Brown versus Gabriel Benitez. I've got to go Gabriel Benitez here over TJ Brown. TJ Brown actually has some weirdly okay wins in his career, but some of them are interesting decisions, to say the least, in a lot of the cases. I'm going to trust Gabriel Benitez to get this one done. I think he's just that next step up in competition above a guy like TJ Brown. He's got devastating kicks as well, and we saw TJ Brown have a lot of problems with the calf kicks and the kicks in general of Danny Chavez, even against other opponents as well. I think Benitez has got really good kicks. He'll use those kicks against TJ Brown to slow him down in the earlier parts of the rounds, to the calf kick early, to the body kick early as well. And I think TJ Brown's just going to be stuck shooting pointless takedowns that he isn't really going to get. I just don't think TJ Brown's really that good. He's a tough guy. He's got that toughness. He wants to win. He's very desperate to win at all times. And he does grind out close decisions where he needs to by doing stuff that he needs to do and pushing fighters against the cage and dragging them down here and there and being a very pressure-heavy fighter as the fight goes on typically, unless you chop him down early. But Billy Quarantillo did kind of show that Gabriel Benitez does start to slow down, but Billy Quarantillo is a very fucking good UFC featherweight. So I'm going to trust in my main man Gabriel Benitez here to go out there and kick the shit out of TJ Brown early. And because of the kicking the shit out of TJ Brown, I don't see TJ Brown being able to overcome the bad cardio of Benitez as the fight goes on. In fact, I might even go for like a first round TKO for Gabriel Benitez. Chopping at the legs early, going to the body early. TJ Brown starts to make something happen at the end of round 1. Gets clipped with a big shot with no base underneath him. Down goes TJ Brown. First round TKO for Gabriel Benitez, I'm calling it. Moving on up the card. Ramiz Brahimaj versus Court McGee. Court McGee, you devilish underdog you, is what I initially thought when I saw this matchup. I think Ramiz Brahimaj is going to win this one. Very good in the early rounds, a lot younger, training at a good gym. I think he's got a lot more finish ability than Court McGee in this fight. There is a chance he could slow down as the fight goes on, but I don't think that's going to happen against Court McGee, and if it does, I can still see Ramiz Brahimaj winning those early rounds enough to win himself this decision. But when I first saw this, I thought, oh my god, Court McGee's not a bad underdog. You know, I might look into maybe picking him as an underdog. There's a part of me that could see picking him as an underdog. And then I realised they've given Ramiz Brahimaj as an underdog here. The younger guy, who we know is devoting his whole life to this fucking game, because if you're returning to the octagon after what happened to his fucking ear against Max Griffin, you want this, okay? Like, if your ear being literally fucking taken off of your head isn't enough to deter you from the sport of MMA, you want this shit. So I'm really trusting in Ramiz Brahimaj here. And he's an underdog. I've got to take that because I was thinking Court McGee would be like a sizable underdog here. Maybe a slight underdog that some people would consider. But I'm going to side in the way of Ramiz Brahimaj. He's got good grappling. I don't see him getting out grappled here. I don't see him getting out struck here, at least in the early rounds. The one problem I see is maybe Court McGee's pressure and toughness can make him do well into the later rounds of this fight. But Court McGee got really badly hurt against Carlos Condit. Had his nose shattered in that fight as well. I'm going to trust Ramiz Brahimaj. Quick, good early on in fights. And also, Max Griffin, although it seemed like a bad loss at the time, he's a pretty capable fighter himself as well. Just beat Carlos Condit himself by a very clear decision and had a great performance there, chopping at the calf. So I'm going to go with Ramiz Brahimaj here, getting the job done over Court McGee. I like it. It's risky, though, because it's Court McGee, and he beat Whittaker, which I have to mention every single time I see him fight on a card. But Brahimaj is good enough, right? Moving on, up the card, Jamie Pickett versus Holmes. I've been looking forward to this one for a very long time. I was shocked that this guy didn't get signed off the Contender Series. Joseph Holmes, I mean, he looked really good on the Contender Series against Barnes, who's a good fighter himself, 6-1 at the time as well. Finished him as well by rear naked choke in the second round, and looked okay in that fight compared to some of the others on that card. But they didn't actually give him a contract on there, so all he did was go to another promotion, Fury FC, fight an absolute can, 6-5 Jonathan Patty, who's, you know, not the best fighter in the world, let's just say, but he's lost to Jamie Pickett on the Contender Series himself, tried to bounce back, of course got given Joseph Holmes on the regional scene and now has lost, but he beat Jamie Pickett by second round TKO, and Joseph Holmes just schooled him in the first round and destroyed him. Or he lost to Jamie Pickett by second round TKO, and Joseph Holmes just destroyed him in the first round with ease. I'm going to trust in Joseph Holmes to beat Jamie Pickett here. The one way I like seeing Jamie Pickett win, or maybe like the idea of him winning, is that he'll be maybe too rangy for some people and land some good shots outside of their range where they're not used to being hit by him, because he's got an 80-inch reach at like 6'2" or 3", I believe. But Joseph Holmes, an equally long rangy guy with a good Muay Thai background, I don't see him getting out grappled, because Jamie Pickett didn't show a great grappling game against Laureano Strapoli, just kind of held him against the cage in certain moments and did stuff there. It's not like Jamie Pickett's got a strong grappling game to chuck him around or get him down and dominate him there. And Holmes is rangier, better at controlling distance, has more power in his hands in my opinion, has way better accuracy on the feet as well and better speed, and more experience in stand-up fights because he has the Muay Thai background. He's fought in Muay Thai fights before. He's had the amateur career in MMA, which I always like to see because it shows you're taking your career seriously. And he's been really active recently as well. Fought in October on the Contender Series, won, didn't get the contract, turned right back around at the end of November, fought there, won, now he's turning right back around in January. I like the activity, I like the snowball effect. I'm going to go with Joseph Holmes winning this one by... I'll say he clips Pickett. I mean, if Jordan Wright can, I'm going to trust Joseph Holmes to do the same thing. So I'm going to go first round TKO. Joseph Holmes gets the job done by being a way better striker, and I think the grappling is going to be pointless. Moving on, up the card. Brito versus Algeo. Big fight on the card. Looking forward to this one. Joanderson Brito, of course, from the Contender Series again. Bill Algeo had a couple of weird decisions back and forth. I mean, he arguably could have actually beaten Ricardo Ramos, but they gave it to Ricardo Ramos. Very close fight. Should maybe go the way of Ricardo Ramos. I'm not saying a robbery or anything like that, but just a very close decision. A very competitive fight, but... he's beaten guys like Spike Carlisle, which is actually a pretty good win. Carlisle's on a win streak right now. Lost to Ricardo Lamas in his debut, but had a couple of good early rounds. But again, if you're going to be anything special, you should just sort of destroy the Ricardo Lamases of the world. And Bill Algeo's hardly a young guy anymore, 32 years of age. In fact, Joanderson Brito is the younger guy here coming into this contest. I like Bill Algeo. I don't mind the idea of him as an underdog, but I'm going to go with Joanderson Brito because he's looked great on the regional scene. He's got really good wins in his career. A win over Diego Lopez on the Contender Series. Although it wasn't the best performance, which usually wouldn't get you a contract, the reason they signed him was because he's put in the work outside of the UFC, and beating Diego Lopez, period, who's 19-3, is a good enough win to just get you a contract anyway. So he's in the UFC. Against Bill Algeo. He might not even have got a contract. Maybe he didn't even get a contract and he's just taken this one just by being signed by the UFC because they need fights for this card, because this card's fucking terrible, at least before these fights got added, and even then, it's still not the fucking best. But he's beat some good opponents on the regional scene. He's fought at LFA. He's beat Mariscal there, 9-3. He beat Amato, 9-0. 18-4 Zaruz, which is a good win as well. He's been in headline positions. He went 5 rounds for FFC. Against Zaruz, that was a 5-round bout, so I like his cardio base. I really like his stand-up. He's got good grappling to mix in there as well. Very well-rounded fighter with good cardio. I don't see Bill Algeo pulling this one out, and he trains at Shooter Box, so I'm going to trust Joanderson Brito. Younger guy, keeping active, wants to get right back in there after the Contender Series 3 months later. Bill Algeo, 32 years of age, hasn't been in there for a while now. This will be, I believe, 6 or 7 months since he's been in the cage. So I'm going to trust the momentum of Joanderson Brito, and I don't see him gassing out. And that's the only way I could see Bill Algeo winning the fight somehow. And Bill Algeo hasn't shown the best cardio in his own career. So I'm going to go Joanderson Brito. He's better when they're fresh, and he doesn't really slow down as much, and he's been 5 rounds before. I'm trusting Joanderson Brito to win this one. He gets it done by decision, dominantly. For 30-27, I'll say. Moving on up the card, Chase Sherman versus Jake Collier. This is difficult, isn't it? Like, what the fuck do I do here? I thought I'd have an answer by now as I got to this fight, but I don't even know. I'm leaning Jake Collier. I'm leaning Jake Collier, as dumb as it fucking sounds. I know the majority of people are picking Chase Sherman, but man, Chase Sherman just doesn't move his fucking head. And at times, Jake Collier, at least in his recent fight against Carlos Felipe, to me, showed some level of skill. So, really scraping the bottom of the barrel here for some kind of reason as to why I'm picking these fighters to win. But Chase Sherman just seems so technically flawed. He got beaten pretty convincingly by Parker Porter in a great fight, don't get me wrong. It was very active, it was a good fight, but he also lost to Andrei Arlovski quite convincingly as well. At least make it close if you're going to lose a decision to Arlovski. But no, he got unanimous decision by Arlovski. Arlovski stepped up to take that fight on short notice as well, which is interesting. Just thought I'd mention that. He was supposed to take on Parker Porter on that card. Arlovski jumps in and easily beats Chase Sherman over 3 rounds, and then he loses to Parker Porter afterwards as well and takes a lot of damage in that fight too. I'm going to trust Jake Collier. He's shorter, he's got a longer reach, he came up at middleweight as well. I'm looking at the fucking Tapology picture of him right here. Why are you fat? You know? You're a good looking guy, you know, nice and shredded, nice and svelte, you had a good frame, you were a good middleweight prospect. Like, what happened in his life to make him gain 100 pounds? I don't understand. That worries me. Like, that really does worry me, because where is his mental space at? You're clearly not a heavyweight, but you're just there because you're fat, and you don't want to lose the fat. I don't understand, but I'm going to go with Jake Collier here, as weird as it sounds. I'm going to trust in Jake Collier. Shorter with a longer reach, decent head movement, decent inside fighting, showed that against Carlos Felipe. I think he can technically expose Chase Sherman and beat him to like a close split decision win, 29-28. War, fight of the night, back and forth. I'm going to go Jake Collier winning this one. Watching him get destroyed by Aspinall at first was so hilarious. I was like, oh my god, this guy's fucking trash. But he beat Alberto Uda, you know, like he beat some good UFC fighters. Ricardo Abreu 5-0, Alberto Uda 10-0, 9-2 Marcel Fortuna. Like, he's beat good opponents and he was a middleweight. So he's going to be a little bit more technically, fundamentally sound than a guy who would come up in the heavyweight regional scene. So I think those technical advantages are going to carry themselves regardless of his cholesterol level, and I think he'll beat Chase Sherman this weekend by a close split decision, 29-28, in an amazing fight. Moving on up the card, Brandon Royval versus Rogerio Bontorin. I'm going to go with Rogerio Bontorin here, even though no one else is. He's a bit of an underdog here against Brandon Royval, almost 2-1. I'm going to take Rogerio Bontorin as one of my bigger underdogs on this card. Starting the card with an underdog, I can't remember what underdog it was at this point. I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost on this card. It's a massive mismatch of matchups that don't even make sense, but they're on a card together because we needed this card, and this is what they fucking shat out for us to come back to after 4 weeks. But Rogerio Bontorin's one of my main underdogs this card. I'm going to trust him to get this one done. Brandon Royval has a Sandhagen-esque habit, let's just say, of turning his back non-fucking stop in fights. I'm looking for a situational prediction here. I'm not going off the fundamentals on the stats, because on the stats, Brandon Royval's fought good competition. He's looked good against good competition. He beat Kakhramonov, and Bontorin lost to Kakhramonov. But, you know, let's not forget Bontorin was dominating Kakhramonov before he got hit with those few punches, and was really easily dominating him as well. And plus, there's a chance that Bontorin doesn't even fucking make weight and comes in with a weight advantage and doesn't drain himself down to 125. So, that's a possibility for him to come in a bit heavier than he should be. I know he lost to Kakhramonov, who Royval beat, but he was dominating him. He had his back the entire time. It took like a wrestler of Rayborg standard to stop the grappling of Rogerio Bontorin. He beat Bibulatov, which is a great win. Magomed Bibulatov out-grappled him in certain moments. Gustavo Gabriel's a great win, and he choked him out in the second round. That guy was 13-0 as a prospect. I'm going to trust Rogerio Bontorin to get this one done. He showed improved stand-up awareness against Matt Schnell and got the job done there, and even rocked Matt Schnell in the third round and had success. Matt Schnell's a great jiu-jitsu expert himself, a great submission guy. I'm going to trust in Rogerio Bontorin to hold his own on the feet enough to where a situation will occur where Brandon Royval gives up his back again, just like Sandhagen does, and I think that's where Bontorin will jump on the back and get a standing rear naked choke in the second round. We've seen it happen to Brandon Royval once against Alejandro Pantoja, and he even kept giving up his back against Moreno on the ground as well. It seems to be a habit that he has, so I'm going to say second time's a charm. He gives up his back again, and Rogerio Bontorin puts in the choke, puts in the body triangle, standing, rear naked chokes him against a cage, and gets him out of there in the second round after a scrappy first round that maybe goes Royval's way. I'm going to go with Rogerio Bontorin, second round rear naked choke, as an underdog in the feature fight of the card. Moving on up the card, Katlyn Chookagian versus Jennifer Maia. I'm going to go with Katlyn Chookagian here. Most people are picking Katlyn Chookagian. I know a lot of people don't mind the idea of an underdog of Jennifer Maia, but I've got to go Katlyn Chookagian here. She's got better stand-up than Jennifer Maia. She's a much rangier fighter than Jennifer Maia as well. 68-inch reach for Katlyn Chookagian, 64-inch reach for Jennifer Maia. And in the women's divisions where technique isn't abundant, let's just be polite and say it that way rather than saying they fight like fucking Downies. I trust Chookagian to win. Plus, Jennifer Maia had a really close fight with Jessica Eye, so I know that Chookagian lost to Jessica Eye earlier in her career, but Jennifer Maia, at this point, you shouldn't be making it look close against Jessica Eye. Jessica Eye is kind of on her way out of the sport. I see Manon Fiorot dismantling her. So, although she did okay against Shevchenko to last to a decision, I'm going to go with Chookagian keeping this one standing and being able to outstrike Jennifer Maia at range. I trust a very close, weird decision win over Viviane Araújo much better than I do a very close, weird decision win over Jessica Eye at this point in both of their careers. Plus, Chookagian beat Cynthia Calvillo quite convincingly. She beat Antonina Shevchenko. She's only lost to Andrade Shevchenko. Just lost to Gillian Robertson due to an escape in overtime, though, in a grappling bout, which fucking barely means anything, like how saying Sean Brady's a better fucking grappler than Craig Jones. Doesn't mean anything. The jiu-jitsu rules are really fucking weird. But, I'm going to trust her to win this one. Plus, she did it before, and she kept it standing, and she did okay in that fight, so I'm going to trust that Katlyn Chookagian, who's one fight away from a title shot right now, because this would be putting her on a 3-fight win streak since losing to Andrade, not even Shevchenko. She's been very active. I like the activity of her. Staying active, took the grappling bout in the meantime to improve her grappling for this bout, no less, I assume, because she's taken on a jiu-jitsu expert, so I'm going to go with Katlyn Chookagian winning this fight by unanimous decision, 30-27, outstriking Jennifer Maia to the distance. Moving on up the card, Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. I'm going to go with Giga Chikadze. I feel bad for Calvin Kattar, man. He doesn't get easy fights, does he? No easy fights for Calvin Kattar. He has a really good chance of winning. And I don't want to say that this is... I said that Giga was a lock on this card. I don't want to get overconfident here and say that, oh, Giga's going to easily dismantle him. Look what he did to Edson Barboza and all of these guys, and he's a great kicker. And Calvin Kattar is notorious for not really knowing how to deal with kicks too well. He doesn't like kicks to the legs. They've been a problem in his career. I mean, of course, Renato Moicano massively exposed that part of his game, and Giga Chikadze has got amazing kicks at range, kicks to the body. Calvin Kattar keeps a very high guard. He's a very long torsoed man. He's sort of shaped a bit like Dominic Reyes in that featherweight division. I think that Giga Chikadze is going to find that body kick a couple of times. I think he's going to find the leg kicks a lot as well. I don't think he's going to finish Calvin Kattar, but I think he's going to win like the first 3-4 rounds to a unanimous decision win in an amazing fight back and forth, where maybe Calvin Kattar starts landing a few good shots in the 5th and finally getting his rhythm. But I don't think that Chikadze is going to slow down enough, and I don't think that he's going to leave Kattar undamaged enough for Kattar to come back in those later rounds. So he's going to win the earlier rounds by outstriking Kattar on the feet with his kicks mainly. I don't know if he's going to be outboxing Calvin Kattar, but he's going to be using his kicks early, investing some damage in the legs and body. Then when Calvin Kattar wants to come back later on, I've got fucking indigestion for some reason. I haven't even eaten it. Haven't even eaten anything. Either way. Thank fuck it's gone. Right, Calvin Kattar is going to be too damaged early on from the kicks. He won't be able to capitalize later on where Chikadze might start to fade, because I'm going to assume with the power that this guy has in the featherweight division and the amount of oomph that he puts into certain shots, that maybe his cardio's not the best, and we did see him slow down in earlier fights in his career against Brandon Davis and Jamal Emmers. Now, of course, going to a split decision against Brandon Davis and Jamal Emmers then means that you can destroy Cub Swanson and Edson Barboza with ease, but that's just how the sport works. You know what I mean? Destroy Barboza and Cub Swanson, but struggle with Jamal Emmers and Brandon Davis. In my opinion, the main reason for his improvements is that he's improved his takedown defense enough to where he no longer worries about it in the back of his mind. And you want to talk about confidence in his striking here. Kattar ain't going to shoot a takedown. Never going to happen. I don't see Kattar shooting a takedown here. Maybe he'll try one just to mix it up and put it in the mind of Giga Chikadze, because he sometimes does that, but I don't see him really being able to do anything if he does get Chikadze down, and I think Chikadze's going to have the same understanding. So if you want to see the best version of Giga Chikadze, you're going to put him in there with an Edson Barboza, with a Cub Swanson, with a Calvin Kattar, against someone that he knows is not going to take him down. Now, he did lose to Austin fucking Springer, which again really confuses me because he destroys Barboza. But that was a while ago. I think he's improved his ground game, improved his takedown defense, and you've put him against a guy who's not going to shoot a takedown, and a guy who hates dealing with kicks. I'm going to go with Giga Chikadze, but don't be surprised if Kattar gets the upset, man. I know I'm being a bit of a Brendan Schaub here by saying, but don't be surprised, and I told you so, don't be surprised, but Kattar's a good underdog here. He's a pretty good underdog here against Giga Chikadze, and he's a sizable underdog as well, nearly 2-1. Chikadze's over a 2-1 favourite, so not a bad underdog pick, but I'm going to trust Giga Chikadze, plus the activity is another advantage that he's going to have coming into this one. He's fought 2 times already in 2021. It's now 2022, of course, but still, within the past year period, he's going to have fought 3 times by the time he takes on Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar, let's talk about the elephant in the room. He took a shit ton of damage against Max Holloway in January of last year. He's had a whole year off. He's not really a young guy himself, 33 years of age now, and he's going to be 34 in March. And he's had a lot of damage in his career as well. Had a tough fight with Ige, broke his nose there. Broke his nose against Jeremy Stephens and was not actually doing too good in the earlier rounds of those fights because he was getting his leg kicked up again. I'm going to go with Giga Chikadze by decision. 49-46, he loses the 5th round or something random like that. Maybe he gets dropped in one of the rounds and bounces back. But I just think the kicks are going to be too much. And it's hard to trust Calvin Kattar after the damage that he just took because, I mean, talk about a war all you want. Oh, some guy just went to war. Holloway just went to war against Yair Rodriguez. He's probably going to be damaged going into the Alexander Volkanovski fight. But that's not a war. That's like you really genuinely had years taken off of your life. You got beaten the shit out of for 5 rounds. That's really worrying. That's like Ortega-Holloway levels of damage, but maybe even worse because it lasted longer and the earlier rounds weren't as competitive. So, Giga Chikadze, fast starter, kicks early on. Kattar, slow starter, doesn't deal well with kicks, and is coming off a long layoff and a lot of damage, which isn't going to make him a fast starter anyway. He's already a slow starter. He's had a year off where he took a lot of damage before. He's going to be even more hesitant in those early rounds. And he's going to get the shit kicked out of him, in my opinion. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Chikadze 49-46. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.